Good evening, dear listener. As the day's hustle fades and a sense of quiet settles around us, let your mind drift for a moment. Perhaps you can imagine the soft whisper of a night breeze as it dances across the ancient plains of Egypt, carrying the scent of warm sand and the faint rustle of papyrus reeds. Or maybe you see the silvery glow of moonlight bathing the silent stones of a forgotten temple, casting long, ethereal shadows that stretch back through centuries. Picture a grand, old city, now still under the cloak of night, its ancient walls holding within them countless stories of lives lived and moments past. Tonight we'll journey back much further in time. Even before the pharaohs and their pyramids. We'll travel to a land cradled by two great rivers, a place often called the cradle of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia. It was here, thousands of years ago, that humankind took some of its first significant steps towards the world we know today. Let's gently explore what life might have been like in that distant era. Chapter 1. A gentle arrival by the twin rivers. The air hangs still and warm, carrying the faintest scent of sun-baked earth and the distant murmur of flowing water. Imagine yourself drifting gently on a small reed boat, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across a landscape unlike any you have ever known. To the east, the mighty Tigris meanders, a silver ribbon reflecting the soft hues of the sky. To the west, its sister river, the Euphrates, flows with a similar grace, their life-giving waters embracing a land we now call Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. There is a profound stillness here, a sense of timelessness that settles over you like the fine dust that occasionally drifts on the light breeze. The sounds are muted, the gentle lapping of water against the boat's hull, the distant call of a waterbird, perhaps the faint rhythmic thud of someone grinding grain in a faraway settlement. There is no rush, no urgency in the air, only the slow, deliberate rhythm of a world unfolding at its own pace. As your boat glides further, the landscape begins to reveal itself in greater detail. Flat, seemingly endless plains stretch out on either side, the fertile soil a rich, dark brown where it meets the water's edge. Clumps of reeds and tall grasses sway gently in the breeze, providing shelter for unseen creatures. In the distance, the faint outlines of mud brick structures begin to appear, small clusters of human habitation nestled close to the life-sustaining rivers. Imagine the scene as twilight begins to paint the sky in hues of orange, pink, and soft violet. The air cools slightly, bringing a welcome respite from the day's warmth. The stars begin to emerge. Not the hazy, muted pinpricks you might be accustomed to, but a brilliant, uncountable host, blazing with an intensity that speaks of a vast and ancient universe. The silence deepens, broken only by the chirping of insects and the occasional splash of a fish in the river. This initial sense of peace, this tranquil introduction to the land of Mesopotamia in the year 3000 BCE, might lull you into a sense of ease. You might imagine a simple, perhaps even idyllic existence by these legendary rivers, a life lived in harmony with nature's rhythms. But beneath this veneer of serenity lies a reality far more demanding, a daily struggle against the elements and the intricate complexities of an emerging civilization. The very ground beneath your feet, though fertile, is also unpredictable. The twin rivers, the very source of life, are also capable of immense destruction. Fed by snow melt from distant mountains, they can swell with surprising speed, transforming gentle flows into raging torrents that sweep away everything in their path. Imagine waking one morning to the roar of water, the frantic cries of your neighbors as the river, once a benevolent neighbor, becomes a destructive force, threatening homes, fields, and livelihoods. There are no sophisticated flood control systems here, only human ingenuity and desperate efforts to divert the surging waters. The climate, too, presents its own formidable challenges. The summers are long and brutally hot, the sun beating down relentlessly on the parched earth. Imagine the feeling of the air thick with heat, the sweat stinging your eyes as you toil under the unforgiving sun, the constant thirst that no amount of water seems to quench. The land can crack and dry, turning fertile fields into barren dust, threatening the very sustenance of the community. And then there are the winters, which can bring unexpected cold and dampness. Imagine the chill that seeps into your bones, the struggle to stay warm in simple mud brick dwellings, the vulnerability to illness when resources are scarce. The weather in Mesopotamia is a constant reminder of the raw power of nature, a force that demands respect and resilience. As darkness fully descends, and the stars blaze in the inky sky, you might look up in awe at their brilliance. But these same stars, for the people of 3000 BC, were also imbued with immense power and significance. They were the celestial map by which they navigated, the harbingers of seasons, and the silent witnesses to the divine order of the cosmos. Their movements were carefully observed and interpreted by priests and scholars. For the Mesopotamian world was deeply intertwined with the supernatural. Imagine trying to understand this intricate system of beliefs. The pantheon of gods and goddesses who govern every aspect of life, from the fertility of the land to the success of harvests, from health and well-being to the fortunes of war. Each city had its patron deity, its own set of rituals and sacrifices designed to appease these powerful beings. To navigate this world, you would need to understand these complex religious practices. To show proper reverence, and avoid any action that might incur divine wrath. Even the simple act of communication would present a significant hurdle. The language spoken here is likely Akkadian or Sumerian, sounds utterly foreign to your ears. Imagine trying to understand the simplest instructions, to ask for water or directions, to communicate your needs and intentions without a shared tongue. The isolation and frustration would be immense. And then there is the burgeoning system of writing. Still in its early stages of development, cuneiform, wedge-shaped marks pressed into soft clay tablets, is the key to record-keeping, administration, and the transmission of knowledge. Imagine trying to decipher these intricate symbols, to understand their meaning and to learn to write them yourself. It is a skill that takes years to master. A world of abstract thought far removed from the spoken word. As you settle down for the night on your small boat, the gentle rocking a temporary comfort, consider the world around you. It is a land of immense potential, a cradle of civilization where humankind is taking its first tentative steps towards complex society, agriculture, and urban life. But it is also a world of harsh realities, where survival depends on understanding the unpredictable forces of nature, navigating intricate social and religious structures, and mastering entirely new forms of communication. The tranquility of this Mesopotamian night holds within it the seeds of a daily existence that would test your resilience, your understanding, and perhaps your very limits. Chapter 2: The Sun's Unforgiving Embrace and the Dust of Daily Toil. As the first rays of dawn paint the eastern sky in hues of pale gold and rose, the tranquility of the night begins to dissipate, replaced by the stirring of life. The air, still cool from the receding darkness, carries the sounds of a settlement awakening. The lowing of domesticated animals, the distant chatter of voices, the rhythmic pounding that might be the preparation of the day's first meal. Imagine waking with the sun, the light already intense even in these early hours. Your bed is likely a simple mat laid on the ground, perhaps with a coarse woolen blanket for warmth against the night's chill. The air inside your small dwelling, constructed from sun-baked mud bricks, is thick with the smells of sleep and the faint aroma of smoke from the previous evening's fire. Stepping outside, the sheer intensity of the Mesopotamian sun quickly becomes apparent. Even at this early hour, its heat begins to radiate from the earth, promising a day of relentless warmth. The landscape, bathed in the clear morning light, reveals more details of the human presence. Fields, carefully demarcated into long, narrow strips, stretch out towards the horizon. The rich soil showing the marks of recent cultivation. Irrigation canals, lifelines of this arid land, crisscross the plains, carrying precious water from the rivers to nourish the crops. Imagine the daily routine of a Mesopotamian farmer in 3000 BC. With the rising sun, the work begins. Armed with simple tools, perhaps a wooden plow tipped with stone or metal, a hoe for breaking the hard earth, and a sickle for harvesting, the farmer and his family would head out to the fields. The work is arduous and unceasing, a constant battle against the elements and the demands of survival. The sun beats down mercilessly, its heat reflecting off the dry earth. Sweat stings the eyes and soaks clothing. The muscles ache from the repetitive motions of plowing, planting, or weeding. There is little respite, only the occasional shade offered by a lone tree or the brief coolness of a water break. Imagine the constant effort required to coax sustenance from this land, the dependence on the unpredictable rhythms of the rivers and the vagaries of the weather. For those not working the land directly, life in the settlements presents its own set of challenges. Imagine being a craftsman, perhaps a potter shaping clay on a rudimentary wheel. The dust clinging to your skin and the heat from the kiln adding to the already oppressive temperature. Or perhaps you are a weaver, painstakingly creating textiles on a simple loom. The fine threads demanding intense concentration under the harsh sunlight filtering through the walls of your workshop. The air in the settlements can be thick with dust, kicked up by foot traffic and the movement of animals. The smells are a mixture of wood smoke, cooking fires, animal waste, and the various crafts being practiced. Sanitation is rudimentary at best. And the close proximity of people and animals can lead to the spread of disease. Imagine the ever-present threat of illness, the lack of effective medical treatment, and the vulnerability of children and the elderly to even common ailments. Water, though life-giving, is not always clean. Drawn from the rivers or collected in simple vessels, it can carry bacteria and parasites. Imagine the constant risk of waterborne diseases, the stomach ailments and fevers that could weaken and even kill. As the day wears on, the heat intensifies, reaching its peak in the middle hours. Work slows, and people seek shelter in the shade of their homes or communal areas. This is a time for rest, for quiet conversation, for the slow consumption of simple meals, perhaps flatbread made from ground barley or emmer wheat, some dried fish or vegetables, and water or a weak beer. Imagine the communal life of these early settlements. Families often lived together in close quarters, their lives intertwined. Elders held positions of respect, their experience valued in a world where survival depended on accumulated knowledge. Children learned by observing and participating in the daily tasks, their roles within the family and community gradually taking shape. As the sun begins its slow descent in the late afternoon, casting long shadows once again, the pace of work might pick up slightly. The cooler air offers a brief reprieve, allowing for a final push before nightfall. Animals are herded back to enclosures, tools are put away, and the focus shifts towards the preparation of the evening meal and the activities of the community. Imagine the sounds of the evening, the calls of vendors selling their wares, the laughter of children playing in the open spaces, the rhythmic pounding of grain being ground for the evening meal, the murmur of conversations as families gather. As darkness falls, the settlements would have been dimly lit by oil lamps or the flickering light of cooking fires, casting dancing shadows on the mud brick walls. The stars, once again, emerge in their full glory, a breathtaking spectacle in the clear night air. Storytelling and the recounting of the day's events would have been common forms of evening entertainment. Perhaps tales of gods and heroes, or simply the sharing of the joys and hardships of daily life, would have filled the quiet hours before sleep. But even in the relative peace of the evening, the challenges of this ancient world would not be entirely forgotten. The ever-present awareness of the next day's toil, the potential for sudden floods or droughts, the reliance on the success of the harvest, and the underlying social structures would have been constant realities. Imagine the social hierarchy that was already beginning to take shape in Mesopotamian society. From the common farmers and craftsmen to the emerging class of priests, administrators, and possibly even rulers, society was becoming increasingly stratified. Access to resources, land ownership, and social standing would have significantly impacted an individual's life and opportunities. Navigating these social complexities, understanding the obligations and expectations associated with your place in society, would have been another constant factor in daily life. The concept of law and order was also developing, though likely based on local customs and the authority of community elders or emerging leaders. Imagine the potential for disputes over land or resources. The lack of a formal legal system as you might know it, and the reliance on communal arbitration or perhaps even more forceful means of resolving conflicts. Living in ancient Mesopotamia in 3000 BC would have been a constant negotiation with a harsh environment and a rapidly evolving social landscape. While there would have been moments of simple beauty, the sunrise over the plains, the coolness of the river on a hot day, the brilliance of the night sky, these would have been interwoven with the daily realities of hard labor, the threat of natural disasters and disease, and the complexities of an emerging civilization. The sun's unforgiving embrace and the ever-present dust of daily toil would have been constant companions. Chapter 3. The clay speaks, whispers of trade and administration. As settlements grew along the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, so too did the need for organization and record-keeping. Imagine the increasing complexity of managing harvests, distributing resources, and overseeing communal projects like the construction and maintenance of irrigation canals. In this burgeoning society, memory alone was no longer sufficient. A new technology was emerging, one that would leave an indelible mark on the course of human history: writing on clay. Picture a craftsman, perhaps a scribe or an administrator, sitting with a lump of soft, pliable clay in his hands. The clay, readily available from the riverbanks, is carefully shaped into a small tablet, fitting comfortably in the palm of his hand. While still damp, he takes a stylus, likely fashioned from a reed with a triangular tip, and begins to press marks into the surface. These are not letters as you know them, but rather wedge-shaped impressions, cuneiform script. Imagine the painstaking process of learning this intricate system. Each wedge, its orientation and combination with others, represents a syllable, or even an entire word. The number of signs is considerable, requiring years of dedicated study to master. For most people in 3000 BC Mesopotamia, literacy would have been a specialized skill, the domain of a select few who held positions of power or served in administrative or religious roles. These clay tablets served a multitude of purposes. Imagine them being used to record agricultural yields, the amount of barley harvested, the number of livestock owned. They were also used for administrative purposes, documenting the allocation of resources, the movement of goods, and the obligations of individuals to the community. Think of them as the earliest forms of receipts, inventories, and official decrees. The rivers, the very arteries of Mesopotamia, facilitated not only agriculture but also trade. Imagine small boats laden with goods plying the waterways, connecting different settlements and regions. What might these early traders have exchanged? Perhaps surplus grain from one area for precious stones or metals from another. Dates and textiles might have been traded for timber or obsidian. Imagine the challenges of this early trade. There were no standardized currencies, so transactions likely involved bartering goods directly. Negotiating fair exchange rates would have required a keen understanding of the value of different commodities. Transportation along the rivers, while more efficient than overland travel, was still subject to the vagaries of the currents and potential hazards. The need to keep track of these transactions, the quantities of goods exchanged, and the agreements made would have further spurred the development and use of clay tablets. Imagine a merchant carefully pressing cuneiform signs into a tablet to record a shipment of wool or a transaction involving a measure of oil. These tablets served as tangible records, helping to ensure accountability and resolve disputes. Beyond the practicalities of agriculture and trade, the clay tablets also began to capture something more profound: the intellectual and spiritual life of the Mesopotamian people. Imagine early forms of literature, perhaps myths and legends passed down through generations, now being committed to clay. Stories of gods and goddesses, of creation and destruction, of heroes and their epic journeys, would have been preserved in this enduring medium. Think of the religious significance of the temples. The central structures in many Mesopotamian cities. These were not only places of worship but also centers of economic and administrative activity. Imagine priests overseeing vast temple estates, managing land, collecting offerings, and redistributing resources. The need to keep meticulous records of these activities would have made the scribes and their clay tablets indispensable. Imagine the development of early forms of mathematics and accounting, also recorded on clay. The Mesopotamians developed a sophisticated sexagesimal, base 60, number system, remnants of which survive in our modern division of time into hours and minutes. Imagine scribes using this system to calculate agricultural yields, track the movement of goods, and perhaps even for rudimentary forms of taxation. The very act of writing on clay was a deliberate and permanent one. Once the impressions were made, the tablet could be left to dry in the sun or baked in a kiln, hardening it into a durable record that could last for millennia. Imagine these small, unassuming tablets holding within them the echoes of a long-vanished civilization, whispering secrets of their daily lives, their beliefs, and their achievements across the vast expanse of time. However, the mastery of cuneiform writing was not accessible to all. Imagine the social implications of this disparity in literacy. Those who could read and write held a significant advantage, wielding the power of information and administration. This likely contributed to the development of social hierarchies, with scribes and administrators occupying positions of influence. Imagine the education of a scribe. It would have been a rigorous and lengthy process, likely beginning at a young age and involving years of dedicated study. The student would have had to memorize hundreds of signs and learn the complex rules of grammar and syntax. Think of the discipline and perseverance required to master this intricate craft. The development of writing on clay was a pivotal moment in human history. It marked the transition from a purely oral culture to one that could preserve and transmit knowledge across time and space. Imagine the profound impact this had on the development of law, governance, literature, and science in Mesopotamia and beyond. Yet, for the average person in 3000 BCE, this world of clay tablets and cuneiform script would have remained largely beyond their direct experience. Their lives were centered on the immediate realities of agriculture, craftsmanship, and family. While they may have been aware of the scribes and the records they kept, their daily struggles and triumphs would have been lived out in the tangible world of sun and soil, river and community. Imagine a farmer bringing his share of the harvest to a temple storehouse, the amount carefully noted by a scribe on a clay tablet. The farmer might not have been able to read the signs himself, but he would have understood the significance of this record-keeping in ensuring his obligations were met and his contribution acknowledged. The clay speaks, then, not just of dry administrative details, but of the very fabric of Mesopotamian society. It whispers of trade networks stretching along the rivers, of the careful management of resources, and of the emerging intellectual and spiritual life of a people striving to understand and control their world. But it also reminds us of the divisions that were beginning to appear. The gap between those who could wield the power of the written word and those whose lives were primarily lived in the realm of physical labor. As we continue our journey, let us keep in mind these silent witnesses, the clay tablets, for they offer invaluable glimpses into the complexities of life in ancient Mesopotamia. A world where the practical and the intellectual were becoming increasingly intertwined. What aspects of Mesopotamian life shall we explore in the next chapter? Perhaps we can delve into the burgeoning urban centers and the lives of those who dwelled within their mud brick walls? Chapter 4. Within the walls, the pulse of early city life. As the centuries unfolded in Mesopotamia, small agricultural villages gradually grew into more complex settlements, eventually giving rise to the world's first cities. Imagine leaving the familiar quiet of the countryside and approaching one of these early urban centers around 3000 BC. Even from a distance, the difference is palpable. Instead of the low-slung silhouettes of individual farmsteads, you would see a more concentrated mass of mud brick structures. perhaps punctuated by the taller form of a temple or a more substantial dwelling. As you draw closer, the sounds intensify. The gentle murmur of the countryside is replaced by a more vibrant hum of human activity, the calls of people engaged in various trades, the braying of donkeys laden with goods, the rhythmic sounds of construction, and the general bustle of a concentrated population living and working in close proximity. Imagine passing through the city gates. Perhaps simple openings in a mud brick wall that offered some measure of defense. Immediately you are immersed in a different world. Narrow, winding alleyways replace the open fields. Houses, built closely together with sun-baked mud bricks, line these pathways, their blank walls often facing the street, offering privacy and protection from the elements. The air within the city walls is thick with a mixture of smells, cooking fires burning fragrant herbs, the tanning of leather, the brewing of beer, the dust kicked up by countless feet, and the less pleasant odors associated with a densely populated area and rudimentary sanitation. It is a sensory experience far removed from the cleaner air of the countryside. Imagine the diversity of people you might encounter. Farmers from the surrounding agricultural lands would come to the city to trade their surplus produce for goods crafted by city dwellers. You might see potters displaying their wares, metalworkers hammering tools and weapons, weavers selling their textiles, and merchants haggling over prices. The city is a hub of specialization, where individuals could focus on particular skills and exchange their products and services. The heart of the city was often the temple complex, dedicated to the city's patron deity. Imagine a more imposing structure, built on a raised platform or ziggurat, its mud brick walls adorned with niches and perhaps even early forms of decoration. This was not just a place of worship but also an important center of economic and administrative activity, as we touched upon in the previous chapter. Priests wielded considerable influence, overseeing the temple's resources and often playing a role in governance. Imagine the marketplace, a vibrant and noisy area where goods from near and far were bought and sold. Here, you might find foodstuffs like grains, vegetables, fruits, such as dates, and dried fish. Craftsmen would display their pottery, tools, jewelry, and textiles. Traders might offer more exotic goods brought in by river or overland routes. The marketplace was a place of constant interaction, negotiation, and the exchange of both goods and news. Life within the city walls offered opportunities not available in the countryside, but it also came with its own set of challenges. The close proximity of people increased the risk of disease. Fires, fueled by the dry mud brick structures and the use of open flames for cooking and lighting, could spread rapidly and be devastating. Imagine the social stratification that was becoming more pronounced in these urban centers. While some individuals might have prospered as successful merchants or skilled craftsmen, others likely lived in poverty, perhaps working as laborers or relying on charity. The concentration of people also likely led to issues of crime and social unrest. Although the mechanisms for maintaining order in these early cities are not fully understood, water management was crucial in these densely populated areas. While the rivers provided the primary source, getting clean water to all the inhabitants and managing wastewater would have been significant challenges. Imagine the efforts to dig wells or create channels to distribute water, and the potential for contamination and disease if these systems were inadequate. The very layout of the early cities reflects a different way of life. Unlike the more dispersed settlements of the countryside, cities were characterized by their density and the interconnectedness of their inhabitants. Imagine neighbors living in close proximity, sharing walls and perhaps even courtyards. Community life would have been important, with shared rituals, festivals, and obligations likely playing a significant role in social cohesion. However, this closeness could also lead to friction and disputes. Imagine disagreements over property lines, access to water, or the behavior of neighbors. The mechanisms for resolving these conflicts in the absence of a fully developed legal system would have been crucial for maintaining order within the city walls. The development of urban centers also spurred innovation and specialization. The concentration of skilled individuals in one place fostered the exchange of ideas and techniques, leading to advancements in crafts, architecture, and administration. Imagine the gradual refinement of pottery techniques, the development of more efficient tools, and the increasing sophistication of record keeping. Yet, for someone accustomed to a more rural existence, life within these early cities might have felt crowded, noisy, and even overwhelming. The constant presence of other people, the lack of open space, and the reliance on trade and exchange for basic necessities would have been a significant adjustment. Imagine the sounds of the city at night, watchmen patrolling the dimly lit alleyways, the distant music from a celebration, the cries of nocturnal animals, and the murmur of people still awake within their homes. Even in sleep, the city would have had a different rhythm than the quiet stillness of the countryside. Stepping within the walls of an ancient Mesopotamian city in 3000 BC would have been a transformative experience. It would have offered a glimpse into the future of human civilization. A world of concentrated activity, specialization, and increasing social complexity. But it would also have presented a stark contrast to the more direct relationship with the land that characterized rural life, bringing with it new challenges and requiring new ways of navigating the world. What aspects of this early urban life intrigue you most? Shall we delve deeper into the social structures that were emerging, or perhaps explore the religious beliefs and practices that underpin Mesopotamian society? Chapter 5. In the shadow of the ziggurat, the world of gods and ritual. Dominating the skyline of many early Mesopotamian cities was the ziggurat, a stepped pyramid-like structure dedicated to the city's patron deity, a testament to the community's devotion and architectural prowess. The ziggurat was not merely a temple, it was believed to be a physical link between the earthly realm and the divine, a place where priests could ascend and commune with the gods. The Mesopotamian world was deeply imbued with religious belief. Imagine a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each with their own distinct roles and responsibilities, governing every aspect of existence. There was the god of the sky, and Ki or Ninhursag, the goddess of the earth. Enlil was the powerful god of the storm and air, while Enki, or Ea, was the wise god of water, wisdom, and magic. Inanna, or Ishtar, was the vibrant goddess of love, fertility, and war. And Utu, or Shamash, was the radiant sun god, associated with justice and law. Imagine the daily lives of the Mesopotamians being shaped by their interactions with these deities. They believed that the gods controlled the forces of nature, the life-giving floods of the rivers, the scorching heat of the sun, the unpredictable storms, the success of harvests, the health of their families, and the fortunes of their city were all thought to be influenced by the favor or displeasure of the divine. Temples, like the towering ziggurat, were central to Mesopotamian life. Imagine them as more than just places of worship. They were also economic centers, as we discussed earlier, with vast landholdings and numerous personnel. Priests and priestesses played crucial roles, not only conducting religious rituals but also managing temple resources, overseeing scribal activities, and sometimes even advising rulers. Imagine the rituals and ceremonies that would have taken place within the temple precinct. Offerings of food, drink, and precious goods would have been made to appease the gods and ensure their continued benevolence. Prayers and hymns would have been recited, seeking divine favor and guidance. Animal sacrifices may have been performed as a more significant form of offering. Music and dance likely played a role in these religious ceremonies. Imagine the sounds of simple instruments, perhaps drums, flutes, and stringed instruments, accompanying chants and processions. The visual spectacle of priests in elaborate robes and devotees participating in rituals would have been a powerful expression of communal faith. Imagine the intricate system of divination that developed in Mesopotamia, believing that the gods communicated their will through various signs and omens. Priests would have carefully observed the world around them, the movements of the stars, the patterns in animal entrails, even the shapes formed by oil poured on water, to interpret these divine messages. This practice of divination played a significant role in decision-making at all levels of society, from personal matters to affairs of state. The concept of the afterlife also held significance. Imagine the Mesopotamians believing in a shadowy underworld, a realm of darkness and dust where the spirits of the dead resided. While their views on the afterlife might not have offered the same hope of paradise found in some other cultures, the proper burial rites and offerings to the deceased were still considered essential for ensuring the well-being of the departed in the underworld. Imagine the myths and legends that were passed down through generations, often involving the interactions of gods and humans. These stories provided explanations for the creation of the world, the origins of human civilization, and the cycles of nature. They also served as moral lessons, illustrating the consequences of human actions in relation to the divine order. The role of the ruler was also closely tied to the religious sphere. Imagine kings and city-state leaders often claiming divine favor or even semi-divine status to legitimize their authority. They were often responsible for the construction and maintenance of temples, demonstrating their piety and ensuring the gods' continued protection of their city. However, the relationship between humans and the divine in Mesopotamia was not always one of simple reverence. Imagine a sense of both awe and perhaps even a degree of anxiety in their interactions with the gods. These were powerful beings who could be unpredictable and even wrathful if displeased. Therefore, maintaining proper rituals and showing due respect was crucial for survival and prosperity. Imagine the personal piety that individuals might have expressed in their daily lives. Small shrines might have been present in homes, where families could offer prayers and small tokens to their household deities. Everyday activities might have been punctuated by expressions of reverence, or appeals for divine assistance. The development of writing, as we discussed earlier, also played a crucial role in preserving and transmitting religious beliefs and practices. Imagine hymns, prayers, and mythological narratives being recorded on clay tablets, ensuring their continuity across generations. These written texts provide us with invaluable insights into the complex religious landscape of ancient Mesopotamia. Living in the shadow of the ziggurat meant living in a world where the divine was an ever-present reality. Imagine the constant awareness of the god's influence, the importance of maintaining proper rituals, and the reliance on priests and diviners to interpret the divine will. This deep integration of religion into all aspects of life would have been a defining characteristic of ancient Mesopotamian society. As we continue our exploration, we might consider the daily lives of ordinary Mesopotamians and how these grand religious beliefs translated into their personal experiences. Or perhaps we could examine the development of early forms of governance and social organization beyond the temple sphere. Chapter 6. The unseen toil, life beyond the temple walls. While the towering ziggurats and the pronouncements of priests shaped the spiritual and political landscape, the vast majority of people in ancient Mesopotamia lived lives centered on more immediate concerns, sustenance, family, and the daily toil required to survive. Imagine stepping away from the grand avenues, if they existed at all in these early cities, and into the humbler dwellings and workplaces of ordinary Mesopotamians around 3000 BC. Most people would have lived in simple mud brick houses, their size and construction reflecting their social standing. Imagine small, one-room dwellings for poorer families, perhaps with a courtyard for cooking and other activities. More prosperous individuals might have had larger homes with multiple rooms, providing more space and privacy. Roofs were likely flat, made of packed earth and reeds, offering a place to sleep during the hottest parts of the year. Imagine the interior of these homes, sparsely furnished with perhaps woven mats for sleeping, simple clay pots for cooking and storage, and a hand-grinding stone for processing grains. Light would have been limited, coming from small openings in the walls or the flickering flame of an oil lamp at night. The family unit was central to Mesopotamian society. Imagine extended families often living together, with multiple generations sharing a household. Children would have been expected to contribute to the household labor from a young age, learning the skills necessary for survival. The elderly would have held positions of respect, their wisdom and experience valued. For the majority, life revolved around agriculture. Imagine the daily cycle of work in the fields: plowing, sowing seeds, likely barley or emmer wheat, irrigating the land using canals and simple water-lifting devices like the shadaf, weeding, and finally, the back-breaking work of harvesting with sickles under the scorching sun. The success of the harvest was paramount, determining the family's well-being for the coming year. Imagine the sounds of the countryside beyond the city walls: the bleating of sheep and goats, the lowing of oxen pulling plows, the calls of birds, and the rhythmic splashing of water being drawn from the irrigation canals. Life here was dictated by the seasons and the unpredictable nature of the rivers. Beyond agriculture, a variety of crafts and trades sustained the Mesopotamian economy. Imagine the skilled artisans, potters shaping clay into vessels of all sizes and purposes, metalworkers forging tools and weapons from copper and later bronze, carpenters crafting wooden implements and perhaps even boats, weavers creating textiles from wool or flax on simple looms, and leatherworkers tanning hides. Imagine the workshops, often small and located within or adjacent to the craftsman's home. The air would have been filled with the sounds and smells of their particular trade: the whirring of a potter's wheel, the clang of a hammer on metal, the rhythmic click of a loom, the pungent odor of tanning hides. These skills were often passed down within families, with children learning the trade from their parents. Food was simple and largely based on what could be grown or raised locally. Imagine meals consisting of flatbread, porridge made from grains, vegetables like onions and lentils, and perhaps some dried fish or meat on special occasions. Beer, brewed from barley, was a common drink, often safer than water. Dates and sesame seeds were also important food sources. Imagine the challenges of food preservation. Without refrigeration, methods like drying, salting, and smoking were used to extend the shelf life of perishable goods. Storage in clay jars and granaries was also crucial. The rivers, while vital for irrigation and transportation, also posed dangers. Imagine the constant threat of floods, which could inundate fields and settlements, destroying homes and livelihoods. The unpredictable nature of the Tigris and Euphrates demanded constant vigilance and adaptation. Imagine the simple joys and social interactions that punctuated daily life. Families would have spent time together, sharing meals and stories. Local festivals and religious celebrations would have provided opportunities for the community to come together. Games and simple forms of entertainment likely existed, offering moments of respite from the hard work. Trade and exchange were not limited to large-scale commerce. Imagine neighbors bartering goods or services with each other. A farmer might exchange some of his grain for a potter's vessel, or a weaver might trade a piece of cloth for assistance in the fields. These local exchanges helped to bind the community together. Imagine the knowledge and skills that were passed down orally through generations: farming techniques, methods of craftsmanship, remedies for common ailments, and the rich tapestry of myths and legends. In a largely illiterate society, this oral tradition was vital for preserving and transmitting cultural heritage. However, life was also marked by hardship and vulnerability. Imagine the ever-present threat of disease, the high rates of infant mortality, and the lack of effective medical care. Injuries sustained during work could have severe consequences. Life expectancy was likely shorter than what you are accustomed to. Imagine the social hierarchies that influenced daily life. While there was a degree of communal living, differences in wealth and status existed. Those who owned more land or controlled important resources likely enjoyed a higher standard of living than landless laborers or those engaged in less valued trades. The concept of leisure time, as you might understand it, would have been limited for most people. The demands of survival required constant effort. However, within the rhythms of daily life, there would have been moments of rest, social connection, and perhaps even simple enjoyment of the natural world: the coolness of the evening air after a long day of work, the beauty of the starry night sky. the companionship of family and friends. Living the unseen toil of daily life in ancient Mesopotamia meant a deep connection to the land, a strong reliance on family and community, and a constant negotiation with the demands of the environment. While the grand narratives of kings and priests often dominate the historical record, it was the collective efforts of these countless ordinary individuals that formed the foundation of this early civilization. As we continue our journey, we might explore the tools and technologies that shaped their daily lives, or perhaps delve into the early forms of governance and social control that emerged beyond the temple. What aspect of this ancient world shall we examine next in Chapter 7? Chapter 7. Hands and Ingenuity, the Tools of Survival and Progress. Life in ancient Mesopotamia around 3000 BC was intimately connected with the physical world, and survival depended heavily on the tools and techniques that people developed to interact with their environment. Imagine the ingenuity and resourcefulness that went into crafting implements from the materials readily available: stone, wood, clay, reeds, and later, metals like copper and bronze. For the agricultural majority, simple yet effective tools were essential. Imagine the early plows, initially made of wood and perhaps tipped with stone or hardened clay. These were pulled by oxen, breaking the hard earth and preparing it for planting. Later, the development of metal plowshares would have increased efficiency and allowed for the cultivation of tougher soils. Imagine the various hand tools used in the fields: hoes for turning the soil and weeding, sickles with flint or metal blades for harvesting grains, and winnowing baskets for separating the grain from the chaff. These tools, seemingly basic, represented generations of refinement and adaptation to the specific challenges of Mesopotamian agriculture. Water management was crucial, and the Mesopotamians developed ingenious ways to harness the life-giving waters of the Tigris and Euphrates. Imagine the construction of irrigation canals, requiring communal effort and a basic understanding of engineering principles, to lift water from the canals to the fields. They employed devices like the shaduf, a long pole with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other, allowing for the manual lifting of water. Imagine the tools used in food preparation. Hand grinding stones, consisting of a flat stone and a smaller rubbing stone, were used to grind grains into flour. Clay ovens, simple dome-shaped structures, were used for baking bread. Pottery vessels of various shapes and sizes were essential for cooking, storing food and liquids, and serving meals. For the burgeoning crafts and trades, specialized tools were developed. Imagine a potter using a hand-turned wheel to shape clay into intricate forms. Later, the development of a faster, foot-powered wheel would have revolutionized pottery production. Metalworkers would have used hammers, chisels, and molds to work copper and bronze, creating tools, weapons, and decorative objects. Carpenters employed axes, adzes, and drills, perhaps bow drills, to work wood. Weavers used simple looms to create textiles from spun fibers. Imagine the importance of basketry and mat making, utilizing the abundant reeds and grasses from the river banks. These skills provided essential items for storage, bedding, and even rudimentary forms of shelter. Transportation relied heavily on the rivers. Imagine the construction of boats from reeds or wood, propelled by paddles or perhaps simple sails. These boats facilitated trade and communication between settlements along the waterways. For overland transport, donkeys were likely the primary pack animals, carrying goods across the plains. The development of the wheel, though its exact timeline in Mesopotamia is debated, would eventually revolutionize land transportation, leading to the use of carts and wagons. Imagine the early forms of construction. Mud bricks, made from sun-dried clay mixed with straw, were the primary building material. These were relatively easy to produce and provided good insulation against the heat. However, they were susceptible to water damage, requiring regular maintenance. Imagine the use of wooden beams for roofing and door frames, and the development of techniques for plastering and decorating walls, albeit in simple forms at this early stage. Measurement and calculation were becoming increasingly important with the growth of trade and administration. Imagine the use of standardized weights and measures, perhaps based on natural items or body parts. The development of the sexagesimal number system, as mentioned earlier, facilitated more complex calculations related to land surveying, agricultural yields, and trade transactions. Imagine scribes using counting devices, perhaps with pebbles or strings with knots, before the widespread adoption of written numerals. The development of writing itself was a crucial technological advancement. Imagine the careful crafting of reed styluses and the preparation of clay tablets. The ability to record information, transmit messages, and preserve knowledge marked a significant turning point in human history. However, it's important to remember that access to these tools and technologies would have varied depending on an individual's social standing and occupation. Farmers would have relied on agricultural implements, while craftsmen would have possessed specialized tools for their trade. Scribes would have been the custodians of writing technology. Imagine the communal aspects of tool use and knowledge sharing. Agricultural work often involved cooperation among families or neighbors. Skills and techniques were likely passed down through apprenticeships and practical experience rather than formal instruction for most people. The development of new technologies was a gradual process, driven by practical needs and accumulated knowledge. Imagine the slow refinements of existing tools and the occasional breakthrough leading to more efficient or effective methods. This constant innovation, however incremental, laid the foundation for the more complex technologies of later periods. Living in ancient Mesopotamia in 3000 BC meant interacting with a world shaped by these early tools and technologies. From the simple hoe in the farmer's hand to the scribe's stylus, these implements were extensions of human ingenuity, allowing people to shape their environment, produce food and goods, and communicate with one another. They represent the practical intelligence and hard work that underpinned the growth of this early civilization. As we continue our exploration, we might consider the early forms of social organization and governance that emerged to manage these growing communities and resources. Or perhaps we could delve into the artistic expressions and forms of entertainment that provided a different dimension to life in this ancient world. What shall we explore in Chapter 8? Chapter 8. The Seeds of Order, Emergence of Governance and Society. As Mesopotamian society grew in complexity, with larger settlements, specialized labor, and the accumulation of resources, the need for more structured forms of organization and governance became increasingly apparent. Imagine the challenges of managing irrigation systems that span multiple communities, resolving disputes over land or resources, and coordinating communal projects like temple construction. The informal systems based on kinship and tradition that might have sufficed in smaller villages were gradually evolving into more formalized structures. Imagine the role of elders and prominent families in early Mesopotamian communities. In the absence of formal rulers, these individuals likely held significant influence based on their age, experience, wealth, or perceived wisdom. They might have served as arbiters in disputes, leaders in communal endeavors, and custodians of tradition and customary law. The temple, as we have discussed, was a central institution, and the priests often wielded considerable power that extended beyond purely religious matters. Imagine high priests acting as administrators of temple lands and resources, overseeing economic activities, and perhaps even playing a role in the early governance of the city-state. The temple could have served as a central point for the collection and redistribution of goods, and its officials would have needed organizational skills and authority. The concept of kingship was also beginning to emerge in some Mesopotamian city-states around this time. Imagine the rise of individuals who, through military prowess, religious authority, or perhaps simply the accumulation of wealth and influence, began to assert more centralized control. These early rulers might have been seen as representatives of the city's patron deity, responsible for maintaining order, leading in times of conflict, and ensuring the prosperity of their people. Imagine the rudimentary forms of administration that would have been necessary to manage these early city-states. Scribes, with their mastery of cuneiform writing, would have played a crucial role in record-keeping, documenting land ownership, tracking taxes or tribute, and perhaps even drafting early forms of decrees or laws. The development of a bureaucratic class, however rudimentary, was essential for the functioning of these increasingly complex societies. The concept of law and justice was also evolving. Imagine the transition from purely customary law, passed down through generations, to more codified forms of rules and regulations. While a comprehensive legal code like Hammurabi's was still centuries away, early rulers might have issued pronouncements or established precedents for resolving disputes and maintaining order. The severity of punishments likely varied, perhaps based on social status and the nature of the offense. Imagine the social hierarchies that were becoming more defined. While the majority of the population consisted of farmers and craftsmen, a more stratified society was emerging, with priests, administrators, warriors, in some cases, and perhaps wealthy landowners occupying positions of higher status and influence. Slavery also existed, although its extent in this early period is not fully understood. Enslaved individuals likely performed various forms of labor. The organization of labor for large-scale projects, such as the construction of irrigation canals or temples, would have required a degree of social organization and control. Imagine the mobilization of workforces, the allocation of tasks, and the supervision of labor. This likely involves some form of authority and a system for ensuring cooperation. Warfare between neighboring city-states was also a factor that influenced the development of governance. Imagine the need for leaders to organize defenses, raise armies, likely composed of citizen soldiers in this early period, and manage the spoils of war. Successful military leaders would have gained prestige and influence, potentially contributing to the consolidation of power. The boundaries between religious, political, and economic authority were likely fluid in these early city-states. Imagine rulers performing religious duties, priests wielding economic power, and both potentially influencing legal decisions. The separation of these spheres of influence would evolve over time. The concept of taxation or tribute was also likely emerging as rulers or temples sought to support their activities and infrastructure projects. Imagine farmers and craftsmen being required to contribute a portion of their produce or goods. The mechanisms for collection and distribution would have been part of the developing administrative systems. However, it's important to remember that these early forms of governance were likely not uniform across all of Mesopotamia. Different city-states may have developed their own unique political and social structures based on their specific circumstances and histories. Imagine the potential for both cooperation and conflict within and between these early city-states. While shared needs, such as irrigation, might have fostered collaboration, competition for resources and influence could have led to friction and even warfare. Living in ancient Mesopotamia around 3000 BC meant navigating a society where the seeds of order were being sown. The informal structures of the past were gradually giving way to more defined roles, institutions, and hierarchies. While not as centralized or bureaucratic as later empires, these early forms of governance laid the foundation for the development of the state and the complex social organizations that would follow. The emergence of leadership, administration, law, and social stratification were all part of this transformative period in human history. As we continue our exploration, we might consider the artistic and cultural expressions of these early Mesopotamian societies, providing a different lens through which to understand their values and beliefs. Or perhaps we could look at the interactions between these early city-states and the broader region. What shall we explore in Chapter 9? Chapter 9. Echoes in Clay and Stone, Early Art and Cultural Expression. While daily life was often centered on the practicalities of survival, the people of ancient Mesopotamia also found ways to express their creativity, beliefs, and social structures through various forms of art and cultural practices. Imagine the early stirrings of artistic expression in the materials readily available to them: clay, stone, and shell. Pottery, a ubiquitous aspect of daily life. also served as a canvas for early artistic endeavors. Imagine simple clay vessels adorned with incised patterns, geometric designs, or perhaps rudimentary depictions of animals and plants. These decorations, while seemingly basic, reflect an inherent human desire to embellish and find beauty in everyday objects. The style and motifs of pottery can also provide insights into regional variations and cultural exchange. Imagine the emergence of early sculpture. Often in small-scale figurines made of clay or stone. These might represent deities, animals, or even human figures. Their purpose could have been votive, perhaps offered to the gods in temples. Or they might have held symbolic or ritual significance in domestic settings. The style of these early sculptures is often stylized, focusing on essential forms rather than naturalistic representation. Cylinder seals were another significant artistic and practical innovation of this period. Imagine small, cylindrical objects typically made of stone or shell, intricately carved with unique designs. When rolled over soft clay, these seals would leave an impression that served as a form of personal identification or authentication on documents and goods. The designs on cylinder seals often depicted mythological scenes, religious symbols, or scenes from daily life, offering valuable insights into Mesopotamian beliefs and iconography. Imagine the early forms of architectural decoration. While the primary building material was mud brick, which is not easily ornamented, there is evidence of the use of clay cones or small clay nails with colored ends pressed into walls to create simple patterns. Later, more elaborate forms of wall decoration, such as molded or painted plaster, would develop. Music and dance likely played a significant role in Mesopotamian culture, particularly in religious ceremonies and festivals, as mentioned earlier. While the specific melodies and choreography have been lost to time, we can imagine the rhythmic sounds of early instruments and the communal expression through movement. Storytelling and oral tradition were vital forms of cultural transmission in a largely illiterate society. Imagine myths, legends, and accounts of historical events being passed down through generations, shaping collective memory and cultural identity. These narratives would have explained the origins of the world, the deeds of gods and heroes, and the values and beliefs of the community. The organization of festivals and religious rituals was itself a form of cultural expression, bringing the community together for shared experiences and reinforcing social bonds and religious beliefs. Imagine processions, offerings, music, and feasting as integral parts of these events. Early forms of adornment also reflect cultural values and aesthetic preferences. Imagine the use of beads made from shells, stones, or even early forms of faience, a glazed ceramic material. These might have been worn as jewelry or sewn onto clothing, signifying status or simply serving as personal decoration. The development of specialized crafts also contributed to cultural expression. The skill and artistry displayed by metalworkers, jewelers, as precious metals became more available, and other artisans reflected the values placed on craftsmanship and the ability to transform raw materials into objects of utility and beauty. Imagine the potential for early forms of games and entertainment, providing social interaction and diversion from the rigors of daily life. While specific details are scarce, simple board games or physical activities likely existed. The study of burial practices also offers insights into Mesopotamian beliefs about death and the afterlife. Imagine the types of grave goods buried with the deceased, which could range from simple pottery to more elaborate personal possessions, reflecting the social status and beliefs of the individuals and their communities. While the artistic and cultural expressions of 3000 BC Mesopotamia might seem rudimentary compared to later periods, they represent the foundational steps in the development of a rich and complex cultural heritage. These early echoes in clay and stone provide valuable glimpses into the minds and hearts of the people who laid the groundwork for one of the world's first great civilizations. They reveal a society that, even amidst the challenges of survival, found ways to create, to express, and to transmit their understanding of the world and their place within it. As we conclude our journey through ancient Mesopotamia in this final chapter, we might reflect on the enduring legacy of this remarkable civilization and the lessons it holds for us today. What final thoughts or reflections shall we consider in Chapter 10? Chapter 10. A Whispered Legacy, Echoes of the First Civilization. As the sun sets once more over the plains between the Tigris and Euphrates in our imagined journey, casting long shadows over the ancient mounds that mark the sites of long-vanished cities, we can reflect on the world we have glimpsed. Life in Mesopotamia in 3000 BC was a tapestry woven from the threads of harsh environmental realities, the burgeoning complexities of social organization, the deep-seated influence of religious belief, and the nascent expressions of human ingenuity and culture. Imagine the daily rhythms we have explored: the farmer toiling under the relentless sun, the craftsman shaping raw materials with skilled hands, the scribe pressing cuneiform into clay, the priest officiating in the shadow of the ziggurat, the merchant navigating the waterways with precious goods. These were the lives that formed the bedrock of this early civilization, a testament to human resilience and the drive to build and create. We have seen a world where survival depended on understanding the unpredictable nature of the rivers and the climate, where communities learned to harness the life-giving waters through irrigation and build shelters from the readily available mud. We have witnessed the gradual emergence of cities, centers of trade, innovation, and social interaction, bringing both opportunities and challenges. The profound influence of religion permeated every aspect of life, with a pantheon of powerful deities believed to govern the cosmos and human affairs. Rituals, offerings, and the interpretation of omens played a crucial role in seeking divine favor and understanding the world. The towering ziggurats stood as powerful symbols of this connection between the earthly and the divine. We have traced the development of cuneiform writing, a revolutionary technology that allowed for record-keeping, administration, and the preservation of knowledge and stories. The clay tablets serve as enduring witnesses to the thoughts, transactions, and beliefs of these ancient people. The early forms of social organization and governance, though perhaps rudimentary by modern standards, laid the foundation for more complex political structures. The emergence of leadership, administration, and the beginnings of law and social hierarchy were crucial steps in the development of the state. And we have touched upon the artistic and cultural expressions that reveal the human spirit at work, finding beauty in simple forms, adorning everyday objects, and passing down stories and traditions that shaped collective identity. Why, indeed, would you not last a day in ancient Mesopotamia? Perhaps it is the sheer physical demands of daily life, the constant toil under a blazing sun, or the vulnerability to the unpredictable forces of nature. Perhaps it is the challenge of navigating a society with different social norms, religious beliefs, and forms of communication. Perhaps it is the lack of the comforts and conveniences that we take for granted in the modern world. Yet, within these challenges lies the remarkable achievement of the Mesopotamian people. They transformed a seemingly inhospitable land into a cradle of civilization, laying the groundwork for many of the advancements that would follow. Their innovations in agriculture, writing, urban planning, law, and astronomy left an indelible mark on human history. Imagine standing on the same ground where these ancient people walked, farmed, traded, and worshipped. The echoes of their lives may be faint, carried on the desert wind, but their legacy endures in the ruins of their cities and the words preserved on their clay tablets. They were pioneers, grappling with fundamental questions of survival, organization, and meaning. And their journey offers valuable lessons about human adaptability, ingenuity, and the enduring quest for a better life. As we conclude this gentle exploration, remember that history is not just a collection of dates and names, but a tapestry of human experiences, filled with both hardship and resilience, struggle and innovation. The story of ancient Mesopotamia, whispered across the millennia, reminds us of our shared human story and the long and complex journey of civilization. The land between the rivers may seem distant and long ago, but its echoes continue to resonate in the world we inhabit today. May this journey into the past leave you with a sense of wonder and a deeper appreciation for the foundations upon which our modern world is built. And may the quiet contemplation of this ancient time bring you a sense of peace and tranquility as the day concludes. You can now close your eyes and let the currents of time carry you far away. Allow the images of ancient Mesopotamia to settle in your mind. Picture the gentle rivers, the fertile fields under the bright sun, the hard-working people, the majestic temples reaching towards the starry night sky. Feel the slow rhythm of life there, the steady beat of day and night, the close connection between people and nature and the community. Though life was full of hardships and challenges, they still found joy in simple things. Still created and built a brilliant civilization. Trust that, even as time passes, the stories of the past are always there, waiting for us to discover and contemplate. Every trace, every ancient inscription is a thread connecting us to those who lived before, helping us understand more about the long journey of humankind. Let warmth and peace spread through you as you think about what has passed. Sleep will come gently, carrying the echoes of an ancient world, where the first foundations of human civilization were laid. Sleep well.